The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, everybody, and good afternoon to those of you who are attending from Europe. My name's Paul Fenton. I'm the President and CEO of Montrium, and today I'm going to be talking to you about quality management in SharePoint 2013. The webinar today is an informative webinar, and the aim is really to try and share with you how we can use SharePoint within the context of quality management applications and for life sciences. Once the webinar is finished, we'll be recording the webinar and providing that online, but we'll also be distributing any slides if you request them. You'll see in the GoToWebinar control panel that there's a place for you to ask questions, so feel free to write your questions there, and if I have time at the end of the webinar, I'll respond to those questions. You can also tweet me at Paul K. Fenton after the webinar if you have any particular questions as well. So the agenda today, we're primarily focusing on the changing GXP environment and all of the different pressures that we're experiencing within the industry and the impact of those pressures on quality management. We'll also look briefly at what the regulations say, and we'll also try and evaluate how we can better implement those regulations. We'll talk a little bit about proactive quality management and the definition of proactive quality management and the various different components that we need to have a collaborative quality environment. We'll also talk about quality data and operational data and the importance of that data to provide us with what we need to have insight into the quality management system and business intelligence tools. We'll then go through some real-life examples of quality management in a collaborative environment, and then we'll finish up with some recommendations and conclusions. So let's get started. Today there's a lot of changes going on in the pharmaceutical industry, and these changes all have impact on GXP quality, because quality obviously is at the heart of everything that we do. We're seeing, of course, the concept of risk-based approach, and we're really expected now to apply risk-based approach across the board, not just in things like monitoring, but also in all aspects of clinical trial and execution and pharmaceutical manufacturing. There's also an expectation that our quality systems are integrated, so all of the different components are working together. We're all faced, of course, with the patent cliff as well, and that's really having a big impact on our resources that we have available to be able to do our everyday work, so we need to get smarter in the way that we do things. We're also in an era of computerized systems, and more the operations that we conduct are controlled and facilitated by computerized systems, and the regulatory agencies are also starting to expect more and more that we use computerized systems to be able to better manage our operations. There's definitely a lot of focus on traceability, and again, this is with the inspectorate. They're really looking for increased traceability around clinical trial execution as well as pharmaceutical manufacturing. They're also expecting timeliness of information, so information really needs to be compiled at the time of occurrence. We're also seeing that we're dealing with more global and complex studies as we're looking for naive patients. And we're also increasing our outsourcing, so many of our operations are being done by third parties. This also has a big impact on GXP quality. Then finally, offshore manufacturing is also something that's occurring more and more, and recently we've seen a lot of cases where there's been quality issues from offshore manufacturers, which have resulted in regulatory findings. So all of these things really do have a very big impact in the way that we manage quality today. Now, when you registered for the webinar, we asked you several questions, and one of those questions was, how do you currently manage your quality system? And this is the result. We can see that just under a quarter of you actually manage your quality fully electronically. So that's actually quite a small number. Most of you manage quality in a hybrid type system where you're dealing with paper as well as electronic information, and then just under a quarter of you also still manage quality on paper. So that's interesting. So there's definitely a move towards electronic, but we're not there yet. Now, if we think about some of the reasons why a company would want to implement an electronic quality management system, some of them are very obvious. So obviously, we want to be able to document quality events electronically. We want to increase collaboration, so the way that we actually collaborate with the various different participants in the quality system. We want to reduce risk, of course, that's a must. We want to improve control and efficiency, and we want to improve compliance. Those things really go without saying. I think, in addition, we're also trying to gain better insight into quality events and improve our knowledge around our operations and also around quality. And finally, we're doing it because we really want to become proactive, and EQMS really enables us to become proactive in quality management. So let's talk a little bit now about what the regulations say. The primary harmonized guidance that we're dealing with today is ICH Q10. This is, of course, closely related to Q9 and Q8 and is integrated in each region's legislation. And ICH Q10 talks about pharmaceutical quality systems, and there are some key words in that guidance which are very insightful and really give us a good understanding of the inspectorate's thinking. The first item that I found particularly interested is the definition. So really the goal of ICH Q10 is to have a harmonized pharmaceutical quality system applicable across the life cycle of the product. So that's really from discovery right through to manufacturing, and emphasizing an integrated approach to quality risk management and science. So an integrated approach. They're also talking about the use of knowledge management and quality risk management, which will enable a company to implement ICH Q10 effectively and successfully. And so we need to think about how we do that, and we're going to be discussing that today in the webinar. Their definition of knowledge management is a systematic approach to acquiring, analyzing, storing and disseminating information related to products, manufacturing processes and components. The definition of risk management within ICH Q10 is quality risk management is integral to an effective pharmaceutical quality system. It can provide a proactive approach, so they're talking about a proactive approach to identifying, scientifically evaluating and controlling potential risks to quality. It facilitates continual improvement of process performance and product quality throughout the product life cycle. And so as I mentioned, you should also look at Q8 and Q9 in conjunction with Q10 because they really do go together. And you can see these guidance documents on the ICH website, and I provided you with a hyperlink there. So that's really at the core of thinking around quality management today in the pharmaceutical industry. So let's now talk a little bit about reactive versus proactive quality and quality management organizations. So a reactive quality management organization typically reacts to issues once they've occurred. So they're really finding out about quality issues after the fact. They're not really proactively looking at quality metrics or trends to try and detect issues before they occur. They're really just reacting to the problems. They also typically only interact with operational groups once the issue has occurred. So they're not interacting with them before to maybe detect potential issues. And typically they have a lack of insight into quality information, or quality information is unstructured, so it's difficult to analyze. The characteristics of a proactive quality management organization, and obviously we have an X-ray here, which is a good sort of image of what that really is. It's being able to see beyond the surface. This type of organization actively seeks to identify the potential quality issues by trying to look ahead and trying to identify those issues before they occur. To do this, they leverage structured quality and operational data to be able to provide indicators and trends. And they also promote an environment of strong and close collaboration and open communication with all of the various different operational teams and QA. That's very, very important. It's not just about data, it's also about relationships. So the second question that we asked you when you registered was, how would you classify your quality management approach in your organization? And I'm glad to say that the majority of you said proactive, which is great. 24% of you said that you were very proactive, so that's very interesting. It would be interesting to hear how you achieved that. 25% of you said that you were still reactive, and 21% said you weren't sure. So let's now talk about the characteristics of a proactive quality system. In my opinion, there are 4 pillars of proactive quality. The first is we need to have good data. Without good data, we can't make the right decisions. We also need to have collaborative communication. We need good quality system tools, and we need standardized processes. Now, if we think about the subcomponents of each of those pillars, obviously for good data, we need to have quality event data, so all of the data that we're producing around quality events, such as incidents or CAPAs. We also need to have timely operational data, so all of the information that the operational groups are producing. We need to have standardized dimensions on data, so we need to be able to look at data in a very standardized way, and the data has to be very concise and it has to be exact for us to be able to properly measure it. On the communication side, it's very important that communications are timely, that they're structured. Typically we do a lot of communication verbally via email. That's not necessarily the most structured way to communicate, and there are other ways to improve the structure of our communication, and we'll talk a little bit about those later on. Communication should be very open and voluntary, so we really want people to talk to us as a quality group to really get a good understanding of what's going on within the operations. In relation to the quality system tools, we need to have very structured tools which allow us to collect data. We also need to have very easy to access tools, and those tools have to be intuitive, so it needs to be very straightforward for people to be able to provide the information that we need to be able to properly manage the quality system. Finally, on the processes side, our processes also need to be standardized, and typically they are within the context of our SOPs. Our processes should be timely. They should also hopefully be automated, so we can use our tools to automate those processes. Processes should also be cross-functional, and we should be promoting cross-functional integration. And finally, the processes need to be measurable so that we can produce metrics around them. So I'm now going to have our first poll during the webinar. These polls are useful for us to gain insight into what our colleagues are doing and people's thoughts. And so the first question I'd like to ask you all is, in your opinion, what's the most important component of a proactive quality system? So out of the 4 components, so good data, collaborative communication, quality system tools, and standardized processes, which one do you think is the most important? So if you could vote, you'll see that come up on screen. So we have almost everybody has voted, and collaborative communications and standardized processes come out on top, followed closely by good data and quality system tools. And so the spread is actually quite equal, which is very interesting. So thank you for voting. Let's continue on. So let's now talk about the components of a collaborative quality system. And so we have very standard components that we see both in the electronic world as well as in the paper world. So SOPs, training, management, incident management, CAPAs, change control and audits. These are really the primary tools that we need to be able to manage our quality system. These tools usually are made available via a collaborative quality portal, and our collaborators, and those collaborators could be internal, external, they could be operations, they could be QA, are all accessing these tools through this one place, this one portal. By accessing these tools and performing various different quality operations, we have a lot of process data that's being generated, and that process data can be made available to business intelligence tools to be able to provide insight. We can also have structured data and forms and operational content from other databases going into that business intelligence environment as well to really give us a good feedback loop so that we can make improvements to our quality system. So let's now talk a little bit about some of those elements. And the first element I want to talk about is electronic forms. So if we're moving to an electronic quality management system, we typically use a lot of forms to be able to capture data. That data needs to be very structured. If the data isn't structured, it's actually very difficult to analyze. Within the SharePoint environment, we have an XML-based forms technology which allows us to easily capture very structured data. This data can come from various different participants in the quality process, and we can also pull information from other third-party systems so that we can cross-reference that data, and that's also very important when we want to gain insight into operations. Forms can also drive processes, so automated processes. So let's now look at an example of what a form, a quality form would look like in SharePoint, and how we can use that form to structure our data and collect structured data. So I'm going to launch a browser and go into our quality management environment. Within this environment, I'm able to do many different things, including report an incident. So I'm going to click on report an incident, and that will load up my incident form. This form has various different sections that I need to complete to be able to report an incident, and it's going to require me to capture very structured information. So the first thing I'm going to do is indicate the date of occurrence, and I need to indicate the first date of occurrence of the incident, because obviously an incident could go over several different days, and so I'm going to say that this incident actually occurred last month, and it occurred on the 18th of March. I'm then going to specify the incident type, and this is very important for reporting purposes, but even for corrective action later on if this becomes a CAPA. And so I'm going to say that this incident was actually a non-conformance. I'm going to specify the origin of the incident, and so I could have several different origins, and typically this is going to impact the information that I need to be able to capture in this form. And so I'm going to say that the origin of this incident was from a supplier, so a supplier actually had the incident. And then I'm going to specify what's the criticality. And so I have three different criteria here: critical, major, and minor. And so I'm going to say that this is a major incident, and the originating department is from manufacturing. Now sometimes I could have other incidents that are related, and so I can actually cross-reference other incidents by selecting an incident here, and this will then go and collect information about that incident and link it to this one. I then need to describe what the incident is, so I'm going to say the supplier did not follow specifications to manufacture the product. I then need to start to make some cross-references, and so one of the first references that I'd like to make is obviously on the actual product. And so I can select product, and then I can select a product ID, and typically this would come from another database. It may come from my ERP system or some other system that I'm using to manage all of my products. And I can add additional information, so I could add a lot number, for example, which can be very useful when trying to understand what this incident is about, what it relates to. I can also indicate the quantity, and so here I had 100 boxes of this product and the expiry date. Of course, I could also derive this information potentially from my ERP as well. We don't necessarily have to enter it. I then need to specify the supplier, so who actually generated this incident. And so I'm going to specify my supplier here, and then that will bring up the supplier information. I could also add other references. I could reference an SOP, I could reference other documents, etc. And actually, the more references you provide, the more insight we can get when we're looking at this data to try and trend what's going on. I then need to indicate whether there were any immediate remedial actions taken. I'm going to say no, there weren't. And I need to have an incident owner, and so I'm going to specify myself as the incident owner. I can attach any files. I may have received a report from the supplier telling me that this incident occurred on their end, and it could be a copy of their incident report. That can be useful for analysis, and once I'm done, I would then submit this incident form for review. It's a very straightforward process for collecting that information. It's a very intuitive form with lots of guidance in terms of how to complete it, and more importantly, all of the data within that form is very structured. So the second poll of today's webinar is around the way that you collect data within your organization. And the question is, would you say that your organization's quality information is structured or unstructured? So I'm going to launch that poll, and if you could all vote, that would be great. So at the moment, it's quite a close tie. We have 54% of participants indicating that their data is mainly structured and 46% mainly unstructured. So let's carry on. Another important part of a collaborative quality system is workflow. Obviously, everything we do is governed by processes, including the management of quality. And if we can drive those processes through the use of workflows, we can actually facilitate the integration of our quality system with operations. We can also significantly improve the control and quality and compliance of those processes. These workflows, in addition to driving processes, will actually generate a lot of data as well and information around how we're managing quality within our organization, and this can be used to generate metrics and KPIs and other indicators. We can also use workflows to drive collaboration between parties through task-based processes, and this significantly improves communication and avoids the use of emails. So let's have a look at what that means in the system. So a few moments ago, we filled in an incident report, and we submitted that incident report for review. Now, typically, once we've done that, the person who's responsible for review of that report will receive a task to go and perform that review. So I'm going to just pick up my tasks. So here I have a task sitting in my inbox, in fact, and I can look at tasks either in email or I could look at tasks directly in the system. The system has given me a task saying that I need to open the incident form, complete a review, and then afterwards submit this for QA approval. And so by clicking on this link, the system will take me directly to my form. And in this form, I can see what I need to complete to be able to perform the review. So the first thing I need to do is obviously specify whether the incident is valid by clicking yes or no. So I'm going to say yes, this incident is valid, and I need to provide an impact analysis. Now, the more structured you can get with this, the better, and so you may actually want to ask for more structured input around the impact, and so have drop downs and things like that. Sometimes you can't get away from textual input and narratives, and that's the case here for the summary. So I'm going to put the incident has no immediate impact. I can of course review the information that was entered by clicking on report here as well. I then need to define why this incident occurred, what was the root cause, and maybe I don't know what the root cause is yet, and that's when I would potentially launch a CAPA investigation to try and better understand what had happened and why it happened, and put in place the proper corrective and preventive actions. And so I'm going to say that this was actually a procedure ambiguity error. The next thing I need to do is I need to specify were there any additional actions performed, and if there were, I can actually go in and define what those actions were. So maybe because this was an ambiguity, I may have initiated a document change control, and I can then cross-reference the document change control that I put in place. This cross-reference could be a drop-down as well. I could actually go and find the information from my SharePoint quality management system, or it may be that I'm doing this in a separate system and I just need to type in the cross-reference from when this occurred. So I'm going to say this happened yesterday. And I can add as many actions as I want here, of course. I can again add any attachments that I need to, and then I can confirm my review and I can submit this then for QA approval. And then the workflow will move on to the next task, which is really requesting input from quality assurance to go and review that incident and then close it out. Okay, so let's now talk a little bit about what we can do with that structured information that we're entering into our quality system. Business intelligence is an extremely important tool, especially in a proactive quality management system, because it really gives us the insight that we need to make those decisions. Now, there may be some ambiguity between what is business intelligence versus reporting. Typically, reporting is one-dimensional, and it's really a listing of information. Sometimes it's not even that useful, but it's typically what we've used in systems. Business intelligence allows us to look at quality and operational data in one place, but more importantly in different dimensions, and that's what's really important. That's what enables us to mine that data and get insight. So business intelligence really is at the heart of proactive quality management, and in the examples that we're about to look at, hopefully that will come through. Business intelligence can also help us drive better risk management, and this is obviously a very important part of quality management too, based on what ICH Q10 is telling us. There is, however, a caveat, and this is really a chicken and egg situation. To be proactive, you need to have historical data. We have to have data to be able to act. However, the more data that you have, the more proactive you can be. And so it's really something that you need to build up over time. Now, an important part of business intelligence is defining the proper dimensions, the metrics, and the key performance indicators or KPIs that we need to use in our business intelligence environment. And when we're defining our dimensions, metrics, and KPIs, we need to do this really in advance of putting our collaborative quality management system in place, because we need to make sure that we can collect the proper data that we need to be able to calculate those dimensions, metrics, and KPIs. We also need to think carefully about what DMKs, as I call them, will allow us to trend on our data and gain insight into quality issues. We also need to make sure that we properly identify all of the data sources that we're going to be using, because obviously there can be data sources outside of the quality system, the various different ranges that we want to use for our metrics, thresholds and goals for our KPIs. And typically what we do is we build a data cube, which allows us to build out those dimensions and really make it easier to connect all of this data together so that we can build our metrics, our KPIs, and our multi-dimensional reports. So let's touch on that concept of data cube, because it's a very important concept in business intelligence and multi-dimensional information. And this can sound fairly complex, but in fact it's quite simple. A definition of a data cube is really it's just a database containing data from one or many different data sources, which are all organized along common dimensions. And so in this example, we have all of these different blocks of information, and these are organized across a dimension of time. And this is a very important one, because obviously we want to be able to look at data over time. Another dimension is incidents, and we're looking at incidents by product and by suppliers. And so we organize information along these axes so we can actually dig into different areas. So if we want to look at a specific product or a specific supplier, or even a specific type of incident within a specific time period, having data organized like this allows us to do so. And it will become much clearer in a moment when we look at some examples. So when we start to build our cube, we need to think about how we're going to integrate our data. And in the example that we just spoke about around products and suppliers and incidents, we of course have a lot of third-party data in our ERP system or other databases around our suppliers, and that information is typically linked to products, which are then typically linked to orders from those suppliers for those products. And so this data really lives outside of our quality system, but it's very important. That data needs to link into our quality system through the incident form, similar to what we saw earlier in the demonstration. And so we're providing supplier information and product information to that incident form so that we can properly cross-reference it. We then need to push all of our incident information as well as all of the information around orders and suppliers and products into our cube so that we can then organize it in a multi-dimensional fashion. And from there, we're then able to output information from that cube in our business intelligence environment to be able to start making decisions. And so in this particular case, we're looking at supplier quarterly non-conformance rates by products, and we have a predefined report for that, and we'll see an example of this report shortly. And QA typically will review this on a periodic basis, at least on a quarterly basis, to evaluate the various different suppliers that we have. QA will have measurements, and so for example, if the NCR rate or the non-conformance rate is greater than 5% across all orders, then they may decide that they need to conduct an audit, and following the audit obviously put in place corrective actions so that we can avoid future incidents with that supplier. So that's really the concept of being able to leverage business intelligence to make good quality management and proactive quality management decisions. So let's talk a little bit about business intelligence within SharePoint. SharePoint has several business intelligence tools which allow us to build very interactive dashboards so that we can analyze data and information. These tools, the primary ones are PowerView and Performance Point, but we also have Excel services and then just native, for example, KPI type tools within SharePoint. We can build these directly within the SharePoint interface. They're very easy to build, very easy to put together, and they don't necessarily need to be put together by IT. And what's more important, all of these different components of the dashboards are all interconnected, and this allows us to trend in many different ways. So the first example that we're going to look at of a dashboard is around supplier management. So if you think back to a couple of slides ago, we were talking about the fact that we're using information around suppliers, products and orders, as well as incidents, to be able to evaluate our suppliers on a quarterly basis and to work out whether we need to audit them. And so the scenario is that quality assurance is performing their quarterly review of supplier incidents, and they notice that there's a sharp increase in incidents in Q3 in 2013. They need to understand where these incidents are coming from and what type of incidents they are, so that they can then take proper corrective and preventive actions to avoid future quality issues. This is what they're aiming to do. And so to do that, we have a product dashboard which shows us all of our incidents. And so let's look at that dashboard now. So here we can see the product dashboard. And within the dashboard we have various different what we call slicers, which allow us to filter data. So for example, if I want to see information for 2011, I can apply a filter here and the dashboard will show me just information for 2011. I can also see information on particular suppliers and the various different incidents that have occurred. I've got here overall incident criticality and then the different incident types, and so I can see the different incident types here. And if I want to drill in just to a particular type, so for example if I want to see different complaints, I can click here and the dashboard will adapt just to show me complaint information, and then I can also look at the actual incident descriptions themselves. So let's go back into our scenario where we're looking at non-conformances in 2013, and I can see in Q3 that I've got a sharp increase here. And I know that a lot of these incidents are actually major, and so that is very concerning for me as a quality assurance group. And so what I want to do is I want to start to drill down now by country to see whether there are differences. And so if I look at Canada, for example, I can see that in 2011 there are issues in Canada, but in 2013 things are pretty quiet. If I look in China, I can see that I have a little peak here in 2013, but it's not huge. However, if I look at France, I can see that things were fairly stable, but now I've got a significant peak at the end of 2013. I can also see the various different products here. So this particular supplier, La Sogepa, is providing me with two different products. And I can see the number of incidents by product. And I can see here that I've got 3 critical, 20 major, and 8 minor for this particular product, so Advair Discus. If I wanted to see the actual incidents which were major for that particular period, so for 2013, what I would do would be to select 2013. So this will then filter for me on that year, and then I can just select the major incidents, and I can then look at a listing of exactly what happened with that supplier during that period for major incidents of this type. And so this is a very easy way for me to really get insight into what's going on, and at this point I could decide, well, this supplier definitely has issues and therefore I need to go and audit this supplier. Let's go back to our presentation, and the next example that I want to show you is around training. And so the scenario here is that quality assurance is performing a monthly review of training activities. They recently noticed that there was a concerning increase in the number of days people were taking to complete their training. The number of days was still within the acceptable range of values which is defined in the SOP on training, but they want to understand why there's this big peak to avoid deviations in the future. So here we're going to go into our report center again, and we can see on screen that we have a report which shows us all of the training over a certain period of time for all of the various different departments. Now we can shorten the period that we're looking at to give us more precise data, and I can see that here this line in the middle is my average over all training sessions, and so usually people are taking around 11 days with an upper median of around 17 days and a lower of around 7 days. And so that's what I would expect my training to be situated in, that range. My upper range, as allowed by my SOP, is 30 days. And I can see that I haven't yet gone over 30 days. So I don't yet have a quality problem per se. I don't have a deviation, but I've definitely got a trend that is concerning. And so now I need to understand, well, what department is causing this? And I can look at different departments. So I can see pharmaceutical development within range, they're fine. Drug development's also fine. My manufacturing's fine. QA hasn't done any training. But clinical operations, I can see that they're the ones that have actually increased significantly over time. So prior to the end of March, they were still within range, and then all of a sudden their training duration has significantly increased. Now I know that clinical are in the process of launching a phase 3 study, and this probably explains why they can't get around to doing their training on time. And so my action as a QA group would of course be to go and speak with the clinical group and find out why are they experiencing this delay, and also what's the impact of them not being able to complete their training on time, so that I can take appropriate actions as a quality assurance group. And so this is another example of how we can use business intelligence to be able to trend on information and try and avoid quality problems in the future. So our third poll question is around business intelligence. And the question is, do you currently use business intelligence to trend quality and operational data within your organization? I'm going to launch the poll. And the answers are yes, partially, or no. So if you could vote, that would be great. So it's currently leaning a lot towards no and partially. Very few of you actually use business intelligence fully within your organization for quality management. So that's a very interesting result, and obviously that's a big opportunity for the industry to start to think about how they could use this. It's also an opportunity to understand why we can't use this, and maybe it's got something to do with the data that we're collecting. Okay, let's move on. So I want to finish up just by talking a little bit about what Montrium provides in terms of collaborative quality management. We have a solution called Montrium Connect. Montrium Connect is a solution that's based on the SharePoint platform. And as we looked at some of the examples earlier, you saw the SharePoint 2013 platform, which really provides us with a very comprehensive tool set to be able to build out collaborative quality management environments. Our solution is obviously fully integrated, so all of the different components of the quality system, and we'll look at how those things integrate in a moment. It's also fully configured and fully validated as it needs to be, and is available on-premise or in the cloud. I think the most important thing about this system is that it truly is collaborative. It involves all of the various different individuals that need to collaborate together to be able to produce a proactive quality system. Now the components of our system are all integrated. So for example, our audit management system will integrate with incident management, root cause analysis, and actions management, which really forms the primary Kappa module. This then integrates with documentation management and of course training management. And all of those pieces have to work together to be able to provide an integrated solution. So with that, I'd like to finish up and conclude and provide some recommendations, and then we can move over to some questions if there are any from the audience. And so in conclusion, it's very important that we have quality data and a collaborative approach for us to truly be proactive in quality management. We have to identify and integrate all of the various different sources of information so that we can leverage those to make the right decisions. We need to promote an open channels of communications for the reporting of any quality issues and operational insights. We really need to be talking to the various different operational groups and get them to come and see us before problems happen as a QA group. We need to provide intuitive and easy-to-use tools to collect structured quality information, and we need to use workflows to facilitate collaboration and improve control over our processes. Finally, we need to really leverage BI, and I think this is really the key to everything, so that we can properly trend and identify issues before they actually happen. And of course, our focus really is to strive for continuous improvement. And by having this retroaction within our quality system, we can ensure that we do have continuous improvement in quality as well as in operations, of course. So with that, I'm going to just put out a last poll. So based on the content that we provided you in this webinar, would you now consider using SharePoint for implementing a collaborative quality system or for business intelligence? So if I could get you to vote for me. Okay, the vote's almost in. And 52% of you said yes, you would definitely consider using SharePoint for collaborative quality or business intelligence, and 48% said potentially. Nobody actually said no. Okay, let's finish up. So I'm now going to open it up to questions. There is a question panel which is available within GoToWebinar. If you do have any questions, feel free to enter those questions in the panel, and I can read them out and provide you with answers. So the first question is, how do we integrate our external data into SharePoint? And the answer is, SharePoint's a very open system, and there are a series of different mechanisms for being able to pull information from third-party systems such as ERPs or other systems that you're using within your operations, so that we can cross-reference data. In the forms that you saw earlier, we're also able to create connections to external data sources. So every time we're filling in a form and we're cross-referencing that external data, the data is always up to date. And so it's a very easy and straightforward thing to do, and it was really built that way because it is a collaborative system. Okay, any other questions from the audience? Okay, well, with that, I'm going to finish up today's webinar. There are going to be several other webinars being held over the next 2 months, and you can find information on those webinars on our website. And I would like to thank you all for attending today. I hope that the session was informative, and we look forward to seeing you again in our next webinar. Goodbye.